Day in Colonial Haiti by Philippe Gerard. Narrated by Carrie Wilson. 2 p.m. The priest is overwhelmed by the dead. Why did that woman have to die on such a hot day? Father Germain thinks to himself. With all the rain we've been having, the weather was still cool 2 weeks ago. Now the hot season is upon us. The woman has only been dead for a few hours, but the family insisted on a prompt burial. Bodies don't age well in the tropics, so when a relative passes away, families send pre-printed invitations to the friends of the deceased and then rush to the cemetery to avoid the smell. Father Germain knows that smell. Well-respected colonists are buried inside the Church of the Cape, even though this unhealthy practice has been repeatedly outlawed by authorities, so there is always a faint whiff of death when he celebrates Mass. The dead woman is not particularly prominent, so she will be interred in the normal cemetery outside of town. After having marched down Anjou Street from the church, the funeral procession crowd is now approaching the city limits. Father Germain pinches his nose. This is a particularly odorous part of town. The city's trash, mangy dog carcasses and all, is dumped where the river of Eau de Cape meets the Bay of the Cape to his left. A bit up the river, butchers and tanners process cattle imported from the Spanish colony of Santo Domingo. The swamp of La Fossette is to his right. Bad odors are not just a nuisance. They are a deadly threat. Doctors attribute the high death rate of the Cape to noxious smells they call miasmas. This is why the town's foulest-smelling businesses have been relocated beyond the city's gates, including the most active business in town, burial. The old cemetery next to the church filled up long ago. The Cape's main cemetery is located in the swamp of La Fossette, just outside the city limits. The hospitals of Providence and Charity produce so many dead that they have their own cemeteries. There are also private cemeteries on every plantation because the owners prefer to bury their own slaves to save on fees. Cheap bastards, thinks Father Germain, who only charges 4 livres for slave burials. Burying one's own slaves, he suspects, is also a way for planters to thwart pointed questions from the authorities when the bodies are too badly mutilated. Father Germain is in no position to change the colony's mores. He ranks low in the town's ecclesiastical hierarchy. The head of the Capuchin mission in the Cape is Father Satan. He baptizes and marries all the rich white merchants, and he dumps less glamorous cases on lowly vikers like Father Germain. Earlier today, Germain baptized the mulatto bastard of a black woman. Some white Spaniard showed up out of nowhere and declared that he was the godfather. As if. At least this afternoon's funeral has some class. Marie Rose, age 78, was a member of the free black community in the Cape. She is being mourned by many, including her daughter, Marie-Louise, her granddaughter, Marie-Louise, that's confusing, and her great-granddaughter, Marie-Madeleine. All the women were once enslaved until they bought their freedom over the past 5 years. A free black man named Pierre, the former owner of one of the Marie-Louises, is attending the funeral. So are 2 respected members of the colored militia who served in the American War of Independence, Belle and Dessalines. Those 3 are not only free, but literate. Mental note. Ask them to sign the death certificate after the funeral is over. The procession reaches the end of Anjou Street and makes a right turn toward the cemetery. The daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter march first, clapping their hands and singing a cheerful Creole tune. They are followed by the coffin and then the men, one of whom is playing drums. Father Germain has always been flabbergasted by the joyous tone of Haitian funerals. It's as if death is so common here that it doesn't have to be feared. Or maybe life is so horrid that people look forward to dying? Like every self-respecting free woman, the deceased was Catholic. She had the good taste to die on the day when Christians around the world are celebrating Christ's resurrection. There is even a Mary of Magdalene on hand, Mary Magdalene, the deceased great-granddaughter, as the procession makes its way to the tomb. Despite their ostentatious piety, Father Germain suspects that several members of the family still dabble in the awful pagan drivel that is so prevalent in the black population: voodoo. Devotees of the cult have the gall to say that it is just a sect of Christianity, but many of their beliefs are clearly heretical. For one thing, their heaven is not some immaterial haven for the soul. They believe that the actual body migrates back to Africa, of all places. They don't say that a relative is dead, but that he has, quote, departed. That belief is so prevalent among recently imported Africans that some even kill themselves to get home faster. To discourage this unchristian and uneconomic practice, some planters cut off the noses and ears of slaves who commit suicide. After all, no one wants to reunite with old relatives in Africa looking like a monster. One master even threatened to kill himself too if his slaves committed suicide. This way, he would follow them to Africa and ruin their afterlife as well. Clever. Goodbye, sings the daughter Mary Louise. Remember me to all my friends on the other side of the sea. Tell them we come soon. Father Germain pretends that he didn't hear that. There are far, far more people of color than priests in Haiti, so fighting heresy is a lost cause. Even the white population is a lost cause. Free thinkers, Masons, Jews, Protestants, and mystics outnumber good Christians. As far as the priest is concerned, if he can convince his parishioners to get baptized, married, and buried by a church official, and to pay their fees each time, he has done his job. Most of the priests who came with him from France have already passed. No need to fret over death when life is so fleeting. The gravedigger is waiting next to a shallow pit when the procession enters the cemetery of La Fossette. This lazy drunk hasn't dug the grave deep enough. Again! Father Germain proceeds with the funeral anyway, but he knows that this won't end well. Wild dogs often dig up fresh corpses and drag the bones around the cemetery. During the last war, it wasn't uncommon to bump into the bodies of the soldiers who had picked this secluded spot to duel. No wonder black heathens worry about zombies rising from the grave. Even the dead don't know their place in this cursed colony. During the last war, there was a minor scandal when the gravedigger decided to plant a vegetable garden inside the cemetery, of all places. The soil, nourished by the bodies of the thousands of soldiers who had died in the colony, yielded a bountiful crop, but colonists objected to eating food so closely associated with the dead. Recently imported slaves, on the other hand, will eat anything. Some even dig up carrion and consume it. It's customary in some nations of Africa, apparently. Or maybe the poor wretches are just hungry. Worse, practitioners of voodoo regularly gather in La Fossette on Saturday nights, where they are rumored to steal from tombs to make little pouches filled with human bones, nails, and crucifixes. Macandals, they call them. The slaves who sell those talismans claim that they can protect their owners from poison or cast spells on their enemies, and that they can even speak and dance if cared for properly. Father Germain doesn't know what to think of all this. Voodoo could be both wrong and real. After all, Satan is real. Enough of this. This swamp gives me the creeps. Father Germain throws a bit of holy water on the mound of dirt, mumbles a prayer in pig Latin. They can't tell the difference anyway. And tells the family to go back to the Cape. They don't protest. They have organized a supper and a ball for that evening's wake, and they need time to prepare for the guests. Really? Who throws a ball when their grandma dies? Leaving the cemetery, the funeral party passes by the body of a slave who was recently executed for killing his master. By violating the king's law and God's commandments, the criminal lost the right to be buried on sacred ground, so his body will be exposed outside the cemetery by the main road until it falls apart. Priests in the colony have also been known to deny a proper burial to comedians. God-forsaken profession if there ever was one. And atheists. Jews and Protestants also struggle to find a proper resting place. As well they should. Father Germain stays behind as the family disappears on Spanish Street. He has one more task to accomplish. 2 months ago, a court clerk from the Cape was shot dead in suspicious circumstances. A court inquiry eventually concluded that the gunshot was self-inflicted. Suicide is illegal in the colony, so the dead man must be punished. The first step, according to the court order, is to exhume the body. No man who killed himself can be interred in consecrated ground. After 2 months in the swampy soil, the corpse is probably just a mess of bones and rotten flesh by now. So Father Germain will have to scoop up the remains and hand them over to the secular authorities. The court specified that the clerk's flesh and bones should be placed inside a human-shaped figurine, dragged through the town face down by the executioner, and hanged from a scaffold on a public square. Nothing, not even the culprit's death, will stop the king's justice. Wait. Father Germain suddenly remembers that another public execution is scheduled for this afternoon. He is supposed to be the confessor of the 2 men slated to die. He must hurry back to the Cape as soon as he is done scooping up the remains of the suicidal clerk. He sighs. Caring for the dead and the dying never ends in this town.
A note from the historian. Like everyone else in this book, Father Germain was a real person. I encountered him as well as a deceased woman, Marie-Rose, while going through the burial records of the Church of the Cape. I do not know about his ultimate fate, but many priests in northern Haiti, such as Father Delahaye, who appears in the 10 a.m. chapter, actively collaborated with rebels after the 1791 slave revolt. All the other stories in this chapter, however weird, are also based on archival documents. There was, for example, an actual court sentence ordering that the corpse of a suicidal clerk be exhumed and dragged around town as punishment. This book is available on Amazon as an audiobook, a Kindle ebook, a paperback, and a hardback.